I want to go to something that Mitch McConnell said yesterday. It'll give you take a little listen.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. I think we're always a work in progress in this country, but no one currently alive was responsible for that. And I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to compensate for it. First of all, it'd be pretty hard to figure out who to compensate.
One could say your treatment of that African-American president was a symptom of a little bit of the behavior that we're talking about. But what are your thoughts on that? Just what he said there.
It was pretty obvious. I'm glad you pointed out his treatment of that African-American first president. Was the way he said, no matter what, my biggest goal will be to make sure that, first off, he's a one-term president. Number two, fine, that's a party thing. You want to do what's your partisan talk. But also to block everything that he will present, put forward, or anything that will cause any kind of difference in the country. So I remember when Obama first came in, and there was the issue with, I think it was a Harvard professor, and it was the beer summit, because somehow he was harassed outside of his own house because the police, for some reason, didn't realize he was there. When Trayvon Martin was murdered by his neighbor, and then President Obama said, hey, if I had a son, he could be Trayvon. People pulled their hair out. Like, how could this divisive president keep talking about race in this country? So what annoys me is when you can say we elected this black president, yet you had no interest in working with that black president. So the whole point of having a black president, even for folks who were against him, was say, hey, we're done with that now, right? Can we stop talking about this whole thing? We had a black president, get off my damn back. That is what he's saying, essentially saying. And also, hey, I wasn't around then. I didn't benefit from our ancestors and the humans they owned. So why are we worried about estate taxes? Why are we worried about handing things down to your kids? Why are we worried about building up wealth and then handing it down to your kids can have a better life? I thought that's a legacy of economic legacy. It didn't happen 150 years ago. It doesn't continue. Did it just start with Mitch McConnell's father? All that is BS, and we already know it, but he can just say it and move on because no one's gonna listen to him talk slow.
It seems that McConnell is really kind of embracing this mentality that I got in law school and that I think our society has clung to, and it kind of, as they say, fetishizes Brown v. Board of Education and thinks that after that, all racism ended. Everything was desegregated and everything was fine. But of course, there was nothing to address the housing issues and the segregation that was created by the federal government back around the time where they had the New Deal. And in the Federal Housing Authority manual, it pretty much said that whites will get benefits financially to have home ownership. Also, whites were subsidized to have home ownership. They would pay less in rent for the homes they did than for the apartments that they were built by the government that they could live in pretty much at low cost, while blacks could not, and blacks could not own property. They could not get loans. They could not own property ownership, which pretty much put whites generational in terms of wealth a whole leg above the black community. Those are things that have happened relatively recently. Again, my grandfather, 103 years old. He can tell you about that stuff. There are people still living. So to act like, oh, we fixed it all and we gave you a black president on top of it, no, that's trash.
Yeah, I to sort of echo what you're saying, I think what he does is just dismiss our existence, right? Yes. Mitch McConnell is, I don't think you could manifest a worse kind of human spirit or energy, to be honest with you.
Lindsey Graham.
Facts. Look at you.
Okay, but
I can give you two more.
You're like, okay, I take it back.
But the idea is that this dismissal, right, of black life that's been consistent. The one thing that, and to give it some context, is that, you mentioned Tulsa. I could literally take you from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way to the western part of North Carolina as a state. And Tulsa happened systematically through North Carolina, just like it did throughout every part of the country where black people were actually thriving and surviving. To the conversation about reparations and his idea that black, there's no way for me to, there's nothing we can do, right?
Yeah.
Is this idea we have to know where reparations went.
Right.
And there were reparations given. They just didn't go to black people.
No, they did not.
When the Civil War was over and folks went into the South and realized that left to their own devices, black people were all right because we had skills and worked with our hands coming out of enslavement period. The people who did not have the skills and needed the assistance were poor whites. There's a few books that really speak to this. One is White Trash, written by Nancy Eisenberg. It's a masterful book that people need to check out because she has raw facts in there about what happened to the reparations and to the promise that was made to black people that was never fulfilled. And then there's another book called Stamped from the Beginning, written by Ibram X. Kendi, who evolved the same sort of understanding that this period of life for us was us at our very worst. And there was never addressed our situation the way it needed to be, right? The way that we needed to be ushered into this new world where suddenly you've got people in bondage. And again, sort of being able to breathe your own air. That was all the freedom that existed for most of us.
That's it.
So to come out of that into, well, here's the world with no assistance is something that he's dismissing. And he's dismissing the fact that you pointed to. I'm 38 years old, right? I don't have a grandparent that was born after 1924. My grandmother was born in 1905. My grandfather was born in 1911. So the stories that my grandmother told me before she passed were literally of this era.
Yes.
My father, who's 81 now or 82, my dad never went to school, an integrated school, never.
Right.
I went and spoke at his 50th or 60th high school reunion. Never went to integrated schools. My father tells me stories of living the majority of his life until he decided to go to New York, absent of white people. He lived in a world where he wasn't affected. So the stories that I got were completely different. The information that grandma passed on to us was of a time where things were completely lopsided and unequal, and we didn't have rights. My grandfather, he was an anti-integrationist. As a black man, he had felt the sting of what the white encroachment into black life or white imposition had done to black life, and he wanted to defend not only his family, but he wanted to defend the community that he helped build.
Something that you two touched on that I want to talk a little bit about, because this report came out that I saw this last week, and it was called "The Plunder of Black Wealth in Chicago: New Findings and the Lasting Toll of Predatory Housing Contracts." I think everyone here at least knows about redlining in Chicago, and there is a reason that a lot of predominantly black areas are by the interstate, in terribly polluted areas. That was purposeful.
Yes.
But this is just in Chicago. Researchers found that the predatory housing contracts, meant that black homebuyers in Chicago during this era lost, in the era, I think it's just in, I wanna say the 50s through 1970. They lost between 3.2 billion and $4 billion of wealth. And so for him to stand there and say that, I think it also minimizes that this is not just gross, greedy black people wanting some money.
Right.
Nobody's gonna get rich off reparations, but you keep talking about bootstraps, so give us some. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And reparations comes in many different forms, even just education.
Right.
Like, put all the things that we've done or we suffered in some books so people can understand our plight and what we've overcome and what we've gone through and what we've been put through. Like, stop trying to whitewash it, make it sound like it's okay and we just don't have it together. Put the facts down so that everyone knows what history looks like and where we've come from.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.